Hello, thank you everyone for joining us today. For this session, we're going to talk about how to use an Edge gateway with a service mesh. So first, yes, quick introduction about your speakers today. My name is Adam Saya. I'm a field engineer here at Solo. I help companies adopt service mesh and API gateways. And with me today, Lawrence.
Yeah, hey everyone. My name is Lawrence Godbon. I am also a field engineer here at Solo. I've been here for about a year. And over this time, I've been helping companies also adopt Envoy and many of our Gloo API platform tooling.
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. Feel free to reach us out, on email, Twitter, LinkedIn. Be happy to help, or just, have a conversation. So the agenda today, we're going to start talking about first, what's the difference between an Edge gateway and a service mesh. And then we are going to focus on the differences and basically why we need to use them together. And then we're going to take an example of a service mesh. In this case would be Istio. We're going to talk about the ingress gateway that Istio has already and how it compares to Gloo Edge. Then we're going to talk about how to basically put an Edge gateway and a service mesh all together in practice. Then we're going to end with a demo. Right, so let's start. First, what's the difference between an Edge gateway and a service mesh? So we hear a lot this saying that API gateways are basically for north-south traffic. And we're defining the north-south traffic is basically everything going inside your cluster from a client. So if you think about it, if you have a mobile phone and you have like an application, you're calling your cloud service or anything like that, that type of traffic is your north-south traffic, coming from outside to inside your network. Now, the API gateways are mainly meant to secure traffic and basically expose APIs, do some routing, collect some metrics. So we use them in front of incoming traffic, in this case at the edge, where it takes traffic in, enforce some policies, do some routing, collect some metrics, and then route to your either VMs or services in the cloud or things like that. Now, in terms of edge capabilities, the gateways offer like a request routing. So obviously you can route to different type of, or of your services. You can have like security enforcement, like having security policies. You can have some tracing, collecting metrics, obviously TLS termination, canary release, and for example, rate limiting to secure your gateway, your traffic. Now, what's a service mesh in this case, right? So there's a big confusion, and we're trying to, as we explain right now, what's an Edge gateway. We're going to talk about what's a service mesh, and you'll see that there's a lot of similarities in there. So in service mesh, basically nowadays the microservice architecture is really famous. Like it's to actually add a lot of value to your architecture, in a sense where back in the days we used to have like a monolith, have a big piece of software that has all your logic all together. And it was really a pain to, for example, update it. Let's say you want to scale just a part of your system or update just a part of your system. That used to be a really big problem, right? So to solve this issue, a lot of companies start adopting this microservice architecture, where instead of having a big monolith, you have different components, you have different services, and they're all responsible of a logic in your application. So in a sense, if you want to just like scale only a part of your system, you don't have to scale everything. You will scale only one service. And if you want to change a part of your system, upgrade or something like that, you're going to change only a part of your system too. Now, this microservice architecture is really powerful in the sense where, as I said, it solves a lot of problems that we used to have with the monolith. But also introduced a couple other problems in the sense For example, how to trace the requests, and if there is any problem, right? If you have a problem within your service communication, how to trace where's the issue, or because you have multiple services, you have a bigger surface, an attack surface, where you can have security issues in couple components, and there is a lot of things that actually are complicated to implement with this microservice architecture. Where you'll have, for example, to either have different libraries like cross-cutting concerns libraries that deal with this metric collection, that deal with this retry, like network failures, that deals with service-to-service routing and things like that. Now, either you implement it in every single library and add it to your component, but in this case, what if you have a polyglot environment? If you have different languages that you use in different services, in this case, you'll have to maintain different libraries and things like that. So the solution to that was to adopt a service mesh. So we hear a lot that the service mesh is for east-west traffic, and let's define it. East-west traffic is mainly traffic between services within your clusters, within your network. A service calling another service within your cluster. Now, how a service mesh will solve the issues that we talked about when we're adopting the microservice architecture is basically adding a sidecar, a component with every single service, and that component will deal with all the cross-cutting concerns like security, network issues, tracing, and all that. So every single service will be responsible only for implementing the logic of the service, and won't have to deal with all the cross-cutting concerns. And they'll be all like basically, talking service to service from sidecar to sidecar. So leveraging a lot of all this similar pattern like tracing and security and things like that. So the service, for example, here in this case, service 1 calling service B doesn't have to deal with all like network retries and things like that. It's already handled by the sidecar. Now, in terms of service mesh capabilities, we'll see that the service mesh allow like request routing between services, enforcing some sort of security features like JOT, for example. You'll have like service discovery. You'll have also TLS termination and origination. You'll have also canary releasing and all that stuff. So if you see this list, it's really similar to what we saw on the API gateway side. It kind of offers the same capabilities in this term. Now, like if you see like a topology where you see that all together in your cluster, you will have probably like an edge gateway, an API gateway, allowing incoming requests from outside your network to inside your network, going to different to your service mesh. And we see here that the topology, assuming that basically the north-south traffic is managed by your edge gateway, API gateway, and the east-west traffic is managed by your service mesh. Now, this is not really the reality of the work, because a lot of companies, they have different clusters, and they have like service-to-service communication cross clusters. In this sense, where is the north-south traffic and where is the east-west traffic is all together, right? So just to point out that the difference between the edge and the service mesh, it's not only the traffic direction, not east-west versus north-south. So let's look at what actually the differences are. And first, we're going to talk about how they are similar, and then we're going to talk about how they are different. In terms of similarities, we'll see that service mesh and edge, they'll need some sort of traffic control. They'll have routing. They have TLS, for example, origination, termination. You'll have telemetry, and also like some sort of policy security enforcement. Now, in terms of differences, at the edge, you have different concerns there compared to a service mesh. At the edge, you'll need, for example, to authenticate your request using, like, for example, YDC. You want to be able to call your IDP, authenticate your call going to your network. Now, you want to apply some WAF rules to secure incoming traffic from outside, from untrusted sources. You want to have some sort of message transformation because obviously a lot of companies, they have like legacy systems, and you want to have, for example, if you have a legacy client, you want to have a way to transform the data before reaching your service, and different things like that. Also, having like an API decoupling, because the API that you expose at the edge are different from the APIs that are used within your cluster. And also securing the edge, you want to secure it against the OS attacks, having like rate limiting and things like that. It's not really a concern sometimes when you have like a service mesh, like within your cluster, I mean. So we can see that basically they operate service mesh and the API gateway, they operate at different levels. So you have your infrastructure, for example, Kubernetes, you'll have your service mesh handling your service to service retry failures and all that stuff. And then you'll have your API gateway dealing with your API exposing and request transformation and things like that at the application level. And also the service mesh and the edge gateway usually are operated by different teams. So in terms of, like, for example, the edge gateway, you'll have an API team designing the APIs and actually exposing them. And you'll have also the service mesh team. It's mainly like the platform team that enforce policies globally across all the organization. So we see at this point that we'll need both of them. You'll need your API gateway at the edge, and you'll need your service mesh to deal with service-to-service communication. And in this here, as an example of how to actually implement that, we're gonna start talking about, let's take an example of a service mesh, and the most famous one is Istio. So Istio has an egress gateway. So we're going to compare it to basically what's like with the Gloo Edge in terms of edge capabilities, and then we're going to see how to use them together in this presentation. So first, what's the Istio ingress gateway? The Istio ingress gateway is based on Envoy. It's designed to basically take incoming traffic from outside the cluster directly to your mesh. It has limited edge capabilities. You don't have like transformation. You don't have like out-of-the-box authentication, and you don't have like all the feature we saw at the edge. Now, let's see how to compare with the Gloo Edge. In Gloo Edge, it's basically designed for edge traffic, where you will have advanced traffic management. You'll have also delegation in the sense of, like, you have different teams managing your APIs. You want to delegate only a part of the API to per team, for example, per API team. And then you'll have also federation, right? So you want to federate multiple, let's say you have different gateways on different clusters. Some serve, like, for example, incoming traffic to the mesh. Some serve like traffic to some virtual machines or lambdas or something like that. You can have like a federated model where you can have apply configuration and have failover across multiple components. Also, something really important to stress there, Gloo Edge offers out-of-the-box authentication. Let's say you have YDC. It's out of the box where you can just implement your auth policy, and that's gonna enforce traffic at the edge to be authenticated to go inside your service mesh. And also supports request transformation. Let's say if you have like a legacy client that you want to transform the data before reaching your internal services, you can apply this transformation at the edge. So let's compare them. Let's have like basically first a reminder, like what's the concerns that we have at the edge compared to a service mesh. And we discussed that we need YDC, we need like some sort of authentication at the edge. will need a WAF to secure incoming traffic. You'll need some sort of message transformation. You'll need some sort of rate limiting and things like that. So if you compare now Istio Ingress Gateway with Gloo Edge, you will see that Istio Ingress Gateway is not designed for that. It's designed basically to take incoming traffic from outside to inside your mesh. In comparison with Gloo Edge, it's designed actually for edge traffic. You'll see that Gloo Edge supports out-of-the-box authentication, API keys, YDC, things like that. WAF, it supports message transformation. It supports like rate limiting. It supports federation. We're talking about it. And it supports also API portal in this as a powerful feature. If you want to have a way to expose APIs and have like a self service where developers can just go get an API key and be able to use your APIs. So, and we have Gloo Edge that integrates seamlessly with Istio Ingress, Istio Service Mesh. So in a sense where you can have completely your Gloo Edge handling your edge traffic, applying transformations, authenticating your request, and then take this request to your service mesh directly without passing by any other gateway. So we showcase that how the edge traffic is different from a service mesh, and what the concerns are, and how you can implement this edge concern using Gloo Edge. Now, in this section here, we're going to talk about how to use Gloo Edge with actually service mesh. For that, I will let Lawrence take here and show us how to do that.
All right, thank you, Adam. So yeah, well, let's take a look now at how, in practice, what it looks like to actually use an edge or API gateway with a service mesh. So in reality, more than likely you're going down this journey of microservices, you're going down this journey of Kubernetes. You're going to have some sort of legacy environment, and maybe you have some sort of hybrid setup. But an example deployment may look something like this, where you have some workloads running on VMs. Kind of here in this diagram, we have them running in the cloud, but that could just as easily be an on-premises deployment, et cetera. Maybe you're not fully to Kubernetes, right? So you still have these VMs. You also have some workloads running in Kubernetes, without a service mesh. And then you're also starting your Istio journey. So you have a cluster that has Istio installed, and you have a handful of microservices running, with sidecars, right? And so you have a small Istio deployment. And so you're in this kind of state where you have, you're not completely starting greenfield. You're not completely from scratch. You don't have the luxury of everything you're doing is brand new. And that's the case for pretty much everyone that we talk to here at Solo, just because that's kind of the reality of, software development, right? And IT, like you can't, you can't just start from scratch. And so with this kind of environment, as you're going down your API modernization journey, that's where an API gateway comes into play. And for all the reasons that Adam just outlined, there's a difference between service mesh, whether or not you need a service mesh depends on your organization. But if you are intending to expose APIs, you more than likely are going to want an API gateway. And so, from your consumer or your client's perspective, right, you want to expose a set of APIs. And so in this example, right, you have a user's API and a shopping cart API and a payments API. And these are available, at an API domain, right? And the APIs that you expose to your consumers and to your clients, that's irrespective of how they're actually running inside of your deployment. Your consumers and clients don't care whether or not a service is running on a VM, on Kubernetes, or in a service mesh, right? You just need to expose. They just care about using the API, and you just care about exposing the API. And you need tooling like an API gateway to kind of handle that bridge that gap, right? Or to act, in other words, as a gateway, right? And so, in this example, you have these three APIs exposed, and you have your services running in, kind of this hybrid deployment. And so you have your users' APIs being accessed, and that is actually what's running on your VMs. You have your shopping cart service that's running on Kubernetes, just raw Kubernetes. And then your payment service is the most recent thing that you've been doing, and you're running this as workloads and microservices in Istio service mesh. So how do you actually do this, right? What can you actually use to actually expose these gateways, handle the API gateway concerns, the edge concerns, and also you want something that can handle this kind of hybrid deployment, right? And so that's where we see Gloo Edge as, right? We've been working with many folks that are on this journey, this exact journey, and they're at various stages of it. They know they need an API gateway. They know they want to get to service mesh, or they're starting to get to service mesh, but you still need an API gateway regardless of where you're at in the service mesh journey. And so kind of the recommendation and kind of the pattern that we've seen that's worked to great success so far is that you take it as an iterative journey where you slowly adopt service mesh. And the key to that is by using a gateway that's compatible with it, but still provides the API gateway functionality. And so Gloo Edge is, our API gateway based on Envoy. And you get the benefits of introducing Envoy to your infrastructure without having to go all in to the service mesh up front, right? So in this example, we've been talking about Istio. Istio is an Envoy-based service mesh, but Gloo Edge is an Envoy-based API gateway, right? And so you're also getting the benefit of having Envoy as the proxy in your infrastructure, regardless if it's at your API gateway or if it's in your service mesh. And so that alone brings a lot of value because now your operation teams or your SRE teams, they don't have to know multiple proxies, right? You're going down the journey with Envoy as your data plane, as the API gateway and as a service mesh. And so Gloo Edge can act as that API gateway. That's kind of future thinking, but also can provide you the API gateway tooling that you need. So when you actually use Gloo Edge as your gateway, right? It's a Kubernetes native tool. So, and it also integrates tightly with Istio. So you can have a deployment where it looks something like this, where you have Gloo Edge running inside of your mesh, essentially, or in the cluster that's running your Istio service mesh, right? And this is what will front your VMs and your Kubernetes workloads. And then, of course, integrate directly with your Istio services. So it's a very powerful model where you can, adopt slowly. You can start pulling things out of the VMs, services out of the VMs, services out of just your regular Kubernetes cluster, and start integrating them into your service mesh journey. But you still have that kind of that safety layer of you still have your API gateway, and that's still what's exposing APIs to your consumers. Again, they don't care that you're using a service mesh, right? You just need a place to expose those APIs. And in this model, you use Gloo Edge to do that, and you use Gloo Edge to do it in a way that's still kind of compatible with the journey that you're going down. So what we'll do is we'll kind of take a look at this concept, right? And we'll look at a demo here shortly. And what the demo is going to do is we are going to have two applications. In this case, they're actually web applications, UI-based applications, because it's easier to kind of visualize what's going on. But we'll have a pet clinic application, which is just a monolith. It's a Spring-based application running in a cloud somewhere, right? It's just running as a VM. It's regardless of how it's running, we'll use Gloo Edge to route to that. So we'll have our pet clinic that's running not in the same, it's not running in a Kubernetes cluster where Gloo is running. And we'll route to that as our pet clinic application. And then we'll have a book info application, kind of the standard Istio sample app, which will be running in a Kubernetes cluster with Istio installed, obviously. And then we'll have Gloo Edge running in that same cluster, acting as our API gateway, or in this case, our edge gateway for the UIs. And then to kind of demonstrate the edge functionality, what we'll do is we'll be using OpenID Connect to add an authentication layer at the edge through Gloo Edge. And we'll use that OpenID Connect authentication for both the pet clinic and the book info application. And again, since book info is running on Istio, that's not important to Gloo Edge, right? Even though Gloo Edge can integrate with Istio, it still is acting as the gateway. So we're going to be performing our OpenID Connect authentication with Gloo. And it just so happens that Gloo can integrate with Istio. So we're providing OpenID Connect in front of an Istio application. And the same thing applies to Pet Clinic, right? We're going to be doing OIDC with Pet Clinic that's running in some different cloud. So let's go ahead. And so we'll be showing, again, so we'll be routing to Pet Clinic. Important to call out, what I'm going to demonstrate is that Pet Clinic and Book Info are going to both be running as subdomains, but they're going to be running as subdomains of the same kind of domain. So in this example here on the slides, I'm calling out mycorp.nip.io. You'll see in a second what that what it actually looks like. If you're not familiar with nip.io, it's a way of kind of getting host names or DNS names for just basic IP addresses. And so this is how I'm kind of getting domain type functionality for my IP of some Google load balancer, basically. So Pet Clinic is going to be running the petclinic.mycorp domain, essentially. Book info will be running as the book info domain. And again, since we're integrating with Istio, the request as it flows from Gloo to Istio, that will actually be an Istio and mutual TLS, kind of leaning back to that integration, where we're not even going through the Istio Ingress gateway, and the differences are everything that Adam just talked about, right? So we're performing our edge functionality with Gloo Edge, and we're still participating in the Istio mutual TLS. So the whole flow from the gateway down is Istio mutual TLS, but we get all of the advanced functionality of using an API gateway. And then lastly, with our OADC, what we'll demonstrate is that since we have a component that's acting as our edge gateway, the Gloo Edge component or edge gateway is providing authentication for the entire domain. So what I mean by that is we are going to be able to reuse our authentication for these two applications. So we're going to use Gloo Edge to provide authentication for the entire nip.io domain that we'll see here in a second. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and jump into it. So I'm going to jump out of the slides real quick. And then let's take a look at my editor here. So I have two virtual services here kind of showing up. And again, we're looking at Pet Clinic and Book Info. And so these are the two virtual services that are created in my Gloo configuration. So in this case, I'm running the same Kubernetes cluster as Book Info. Pet Clinic is running somewhere else. And I have two virtual services applied to my Kubernetes cluster, one for Pet Clinic and one for Book Info. And again, a virtual services, that's just kind of how you configure what is exposed at the Gloo Edge gateway. So in this case, I have a domain exposed that's Pet Clinic. And then this is my nip.io address. In other words, just the generic domain that will resolve to this IP, which is the IP of my load balancer. And I have the same thing for my Book Info application. And so essentially what I'm doing here is I have a subdomain called Book Info and a subdomain Pet Clinic. They're both being served by the same gateway. And when I access them, the same Gloo Edge endpoint, more or less, is going to handle these requests. And then kind of quickly looking at the rest of the config, very straightforward. I have a single route, and based off of a prefix path matcher of / or the root path, which matches everything, I'm going to route to what's called an upstream, which is Gloo terminology for really your destination. And so in this case, I'm routing to an upstream called Pet Clinic, which corresponds to the Pet Clinic application running in the VM somewhere. And then on the Book Info side, I'm routing to my product page upstream, which is really the product page, page of the Book Info application. This is the user-facing UI of the Book Info app. So let's go ahead and try that out. So in this case, let's start with Pet Clinic. So we'll go to the Pet Clinic domain, and we'll use I'm going to use a private browsing Firefox so that when we do the OIDC authentication, we can see how it reacts when you first hit it and you need to authenticate. So here, let's go to Pet Clinic. Nothing special here. The Pet Clinic domain, and now I'm at the Pet Clinic app. I can click around just like I would in a normal application. But this is being served up by our Edge gateway. And then now let's go ahead and go to our Book Info application. So here, and then again, the Book Info app really is the product page as we're really the entry point. So here I'll go to my Book Info domain / product page. And when it loads, here is the Book Info. And then kind of the whole point of this app is as you refresh it, depending on how your routing set up, you'll get different colored stars or no stars, depending on which version of the ratings microservice you're hitting. In this case, it's not too relevant, but essentially, so we're using Gloo Edge to front these two web applications. And they both are sharing, they have different subdomains, but the top level domain in this case is the nip.io address, right? Which kind of can correspond to your, whatever your web domain is essentially. So now let's go ahead and integrate with our OADC provider. So in my example, I'm using Keycloak. You can use any OIDC compliant OIDC server. But yeah, so I'm using Keycloak. And so to do so, I'm going to make modifications to my 2 virtual services, which, I'm going to apply these manually. This could be just as easily be applied through some sort of CI/CD pipeline. The only difference between these 2 virtual servers and the one that we were just looking at is the presence of this options field, which ultimately specifying that, hey, I need to do OIDC, and here is the OIDC configuration. So I have one for Pet Clinic and I have one for Book Info. And so what I'll do now is I'm going to apply them. So there's Book Info, and then I need to do Pet Clinic. Okay, so those are both applied. And so let's start with Pet Clinic. So I want to go to Pet Clinic again. And then in this case, this is the first time where we've hit with authentication in place. It's the first time we access it. Now the Edge gateway is going to hijack the request and say, no, I need authentication. I'm going to perform OIDC. And so in order to do that, it redirects you kind of the standard OIDC flow where now I have to log in. And so I'll log in as a user in my Keycloak. That's in my Keycloak IDP. I log in and now I have access to this application and I can click around. So the gateway knows that I'm authenticated. So I'm going to actually quit out of this and I'm going to open up a new private browsing window. And now let's go to the Book Info application. And so in this case, since I'm starting a new session, right, I should be prompted for authentication, right? Because I still have the OIDC in front. And so just like we would expect, I get sent to the login page. I log in and now, I forgot to go to product page. Now I can access my Book Info product page with authentication. So I put OIDC authentication in front of an Istio-based application because the Edge gateway is what's performing that, right? It's not, what happens upstream from, to use Envoy terminology, what happens upstream from our gateway is not important to it. We can integrate with Istio. We can integrate with functions like Lambdas and so on. But the functionality that's provided by the Edge gateway is still the same regardless of where it's routing to. So I have authentication in place, for my Book Info. And so kind of to round out the example, right? Since I have the Edge gateway that's hosting essentially this web domain of my ip.nip.io, what I can do is I set up the cookies so that now this authentication is relevant for this entire web domain. So if I were to go back to, say, the Pet Clinic application, because my browser is logged in more or less, I will not have to re-authenticate because I have the authentication set up to where now it knows that, okay, I'm logged in for this domain that's being hosted essentially by my Edge gateway. And so I can go back and forth. My authentication is valid, right, for both of these because they're running on the same web domain. And so you can obviously, you can architect this however you want, but it just kind of shows, the value of having an Edge gateway that can do things like OIDC authentication, but also can do things like integrate directly with Istio. So with that, that is pretty much it for the demo. And that's pretty much it for the talk. So yeah, so thank you everybody. And I hope that was useful.